Please welcome your host, CNBC senior correspondent, Jane Wells.
Good afternoon, everybody. If I could get your attention, 2 weeks from today is the election. How about that election? Fortunately, California and our economy, we are so big and we are so far away from Washington, D.C., that we do operate in large part autonomously from whoever is sitting in the White House, and autonomy being the word of the day. People love to use the word disruption now. We always use disruptor on CNBC. Disruption is actually a new word for something we've been doing in California for decades, which is innovation. We love to innovate. Before there was the internet, UCLA had the ARPANET. Lockheed Martin is still building things it can't talk about out in Palmdale, decades after the SR-71. And the U-2 came out of the Skunk Works in 1955. There are U-2s still flying right now as we speak, way up there. And they are manned. That is also changing. And those unmanned aircraft are coming out of California too. Apple started in a garage, Hewlett-Packard before it, Disney built a studio here, then he built the Magic Kingdom, which is a place no one had ever seen before. Also in California, Industrial Light and Magic put special effects in Star Wars that blew us all away. We have Alphabet, Netflix, Tesla, SpaceX, Snapchat, and the Kardashians, who continue to innovate, and God bless them. We have always innovated in aerospace, technology, entertainment, and agriculture. I'm actually doing a series of stories which will air on CNBC this week on Prop 64, and if it passes, it will legalize recreational cannabis, another industry where California has always led the way. But our panelists are involved in some really pie in the sky stuff. By the way, someone right now is working on how to make pie in the sky, and that person is in California, I am sure. But we are going to talk about the future, which is about autonomy, about driverless cars, ride sharing, the Hyperloop, or ride sharing in a driverless car in the Hyperloop, and going to space, where California's technology has always taken us further than anyone else in America. All right, here are three experts from pioneering firms who are going to speak to you. And the first speaker will lift things off. It is Timothy Burr, Jr., who is the Senior Public Policy Manager for Lyft, where he works on government relations, community relations, and legislative and regulatory policy. And before that, he was a prosecutor in Oakland. So watch yourselves. Let's welcome Timothy Burr.
To ride a train, I'm nearly drowning in the pouring rain. Hitch it a ride. Hitch it a ride.
All right, well, thank you, Jane. Sounds like we have some brainstorming to do after lunch. And thank you to the Milken Institute for thoughtful discussions going on today, as well as inviting Lyft and myself to speak here. I'm going to start by asking everyone a question. How many of you in the audience own a car or have your own personal vehicle that is yours? All right. Well, if you're like me, my car is parked currently at SFO, where I'm accruing about $20+ a day. Your car is probably costing you money at this very moment. I'm here today to talk about our cars for a minute, about 12 minutes exactly, and talk about what we're calling the third transportation revolution, the way that how we use our cars is going to change, and in effect, how that is going to change the development of cities. We are at an absolutely fascinating time in transportation. We are at, with the growth of ride-sharing companies such as Lyft, car-sharing companies, and the growth of other innovative solutions, we're at a pivotal moment in how we think about transportation, and really at a key moment with respect to the development of autonomous vehicles, and something that California will lead the way in. These innovative technologies have the potential to bring immense benefits to consumers, to commuters, to city planners, and governments. Lyft is excited to take our extensive experience and our recent experience in bringing radical innovation to transportation, to changes in policy, by way of our experience in ride sharing, and applying this experience to the world of autonomous vehicles. Designing a dream city is easy. Rebuilding a living one takes imagination. Those were words of the city planner and thinker Jane Jacobs. And this really encapsulates exactly where we are right now. we have an exciting opportunity to reimagine the cities and how they're going to be created. This is something we're all used to here in California. The reality is parking lots, right? Parking spaces, spaces everywhere. In 2011, a study was done and it was estimated that there are over 700 million parking spaces in the United States. That is 6,000 square miles of parking spaces. That's literally bigger than the state of Connecticut. Take a look as you walk outside, as you're in Los Angeles or wherever you might be from, how much space is dedicated towards cars, towards not even so much to the use of cars, but just how they're stored, where they're parked. This literally is a parking machine. It's obvious when you take a look and take a moment to reflect, our cities have been developed around vehicles. This makes sense. Since all that space that has been dedicated to cars, we frankly don't use them that often. There are over 250 million vehicles in the United States, and 96% of the time, those vehicles are parked and sit idle. That's 240 million cars at any given time that are just simply parked. Cars are also expensive. We as Americans spend over $2 trillion a year on car ownership. Families, the average American family spends $9,000 a year on car ownership. That is the second largest household expense other than housing. This always blows my mind, but more than food on car ownership. And when we do decide to use our cars, particularly here in California, we're not really that efficient in the way that we go about it, right? As Californians, we all recognize this scene. We like to drive by ourselves. The result is congestion and sitting in traffic, and it's really reaching breaking points up and down the state. 80% of the seats in all cars are vacant at all times, which is just a fancy way of saying we tend to drive by ourselves. This is the statistic and sort of the problem that Lyft was created to try and solve. How do we fill up all those empty seats in the car? Our competitor is the single occupant vehicle. The goal of the company and the mission has always been to really fill the seats in the car and make carpooling mainstream. How do we get people to share rides? Early on, it was the vision of our co-founders that if I'm driving to work, if I'm driving to the store, I should be able to share a ride with my neighbor who's going along that exact same path or that same route. One of our initial products and our solutions is called Lyft Line. It was launched in 2014 in San Francisco. It's our carpooling product. It was pretty obvious when we started looking at our, where rides were occurring in San Francisco, Los Angeles, our early markets, that 90% of our rides could be shared between two parties that were traveling together. People were taking the exact same route within moments of each other. So if people are willing to wait a couple minutes, share that ride, the benefits are enormous, right? You have congestion reduction, reduce the number of cars on the road, also tremendous price benefits, up to 50% at times, tremendous benefits coming from making carpooling mainstream. Which gets me to where we are now and looking forward, and that is the third transportation revolution. The opportunity that the advent of autonomous vehicles have, not just for the way we get around, but also how we develop our cities. How do we build a world or rebuild a world around people and not cars? Technology has redefined in the very recent history the way we do things. Last week, my uncle sent me a DVD of his recent vacation up to Canada. It's a fishing trip. I was quasi-excited to watch the video of it. That's the way he always does. I swear on Friday night, we realized that not only do we not have a DVD player at home anymore, I don't even have one on my laptop, which is, again, mind-blowing. Netflix and streaming products have made the DVD player obsolete in a number of ways. Spotify, subscription-based music services have made buying CDs obsolete. Eventually, we will look at owning car in much the same way. Take a look back a little bit so we can see where we're going, and you look back to pre-19th century. You have these agrarian kind of communities that were completely separated. There wasn't a lot of interaction between them, except the only way to get around was covered wagon, right, for all you Oregon Trail fans out there. This changed with the Industrial Revolution. We innovated. We built this incredible network of canals and of railroad in order to connect these communities. And cities, developed out of major areas where those canals and those railroads met. Fast forward a century to when the automobile was invented. And for individuals, right, this meant unprecedented freedom, the ability to get around. However, it was the beginning of a vicious cycle. As more cars filled the streets, more roads had to be built to accommodate them, and our cities were essentially rebuilt to accommodate cars. We spread out deeper into the suburbs, making constant access to a car even more necessary. Now, although we could live outside of cities, that meant to get to work, you had to sit in traffic, and we all know where we are today. Our cities were dramatically reshaped to favor cars over communities. To get between those suburbs and to get between downtown, then we built freeways. I grew up on the west side of San Jose. My friends were split between this orchard, and when I was about 9, I'll never forget, construction began on Highway 85. And literally where our friends used to meet in the orchard and we'd all hang out, no longer was that a possibility. It became like over a mile bike ride to get around to go to the other side of the neighborhood. This is here in Los Angeles where the 110, I'm from Northern California, so I know saying the 110 and the 101 is critical, but where the 110 and the 101 were built. And there's something like 4,000 houses and apartment units were taken down in order to build this important interchange. The good news is we don't have to keep building our country and our cities around car ownership. For the first time in human history, we have the tools to create a perfectly efficient transportation network. And now we're approaching this third revolution with autonomous vehicles. Ride sharing, the crazy growth Lyft has seen since launch in 2012, it's just the first phase of the movement to end car ownership and reclaim our cities. In January of this year, General Motors and Lyft announced a strategic partnership to launch an on-demand network of autonomous vehicles. This partnership is based upon the knowledge that autonomous vehicles can bring enormous benefits in road safety, congestion reduction, efficiency, improved mobility for folks, even public spending on things such as parking infrastructure. This partnership is also founded on the shared understanding that the fastest way to get autonomous vehicles exposed to folks and to bring those benefits really to the people is going to be through a shared network such as Lyft's. The goal, or the vision, by 2025, when I asked that question at the beginning, was a much different answer. Private car ownership will all but end in major US cities. Ride sharing has already begun to empower many people to live either a car-free or a car-light lifestyle, right? Young people have, the amount of folks getting their license has been steadily decreasing since about just after the time I was born. In 1983, 92% of 20 to 24-year-olds had driver's licenses. 2014, that number was down to 77%. In 1983, 46% of 16-year-olds had a driver's license. Certainly when I turned 16, it was life or death that day. I needed to get my driver's license. Today, it's just down to 24% of 16-year-olds have a driver's license. All told, millennials today are 30% less likely to buy a car than someone from the previous generation. This trend is that every year, more and more people are concluding that it's frankly simpler, easier, more convenient to live without a car, and with autonomous vehicles, most city dwellers will stop using a personal car altogether. Within 5 years, a fully autonomous fleet of cars will provide the majority of Lyft rides. If you've been in San Francisco or Phoenix lately, you may have seen some of these vehicles already on the roads. How will this work? Right? How will this whole process work? We foresee a future where passengers access the Lyft network and then pay either sort of pay as you go or buy a subscription model, just like consumers do with Netflix and Spotify. Just yesterday, in markets from Los Angeles to DC, Lyft announced a subscription model where for $29 a month, you can get as many Lyft line rides as you can, introducing that subscription-based model. This service will be more flexible than owning a car, giving you access to all the transportation you need. You don't drive that often? Okay, cool. Why don't you just do a pay-as-you-go system? You drive every single weekend and take a trip? Well, then for you, you should probably get the unlimited program. You're single, you got big dates coming up on the weekend. Okay, well, you should probably get the premium upgrade, make sure you got a nice car, all the works. This will save you a tremendous amount of money, right? Imagine you don't have vehicle payments, insurance payments, maintenance costs, registration, fuel. This says parking. For me, it's parking tickets. Imagine all of that, all those inconveniences are no longer on you, but are on the network such as Lyft that is providing you these rides. We're already seeing these integrated systems and what we call as mobility as a service. These are some of the examples that we've seen in Chicago and Portland and in New Jersey. Just millions of rides already being purchased through these mobile ticketing apps and sort of bringing together all these different types of transportations and moving towards mobility as a service. Look, it's not going to happen overnight, right? At first, fully autonomous vehicles are going to have a long list of restrictions. How fast they can go, where they can go, what conditions they can travel in. You know, as in today, people must be in the vehicle, all these different things. But as technology improves and advances, these cars will be able to do more and more in more situations. Rides in autonomous vehicles will be less expensive than any options today and will lead to more people using Lyft, getting people to really forego owning or driving their car very often. That means in the short term, we're going to have more folks out there on the road who are going to need to provide the rides to those people who are choosing to live a car-free or car-light lifestyle. The overall market is going to see a tremendous growth. One of the first problems that we believe we'll see solved and is being solved today is really that first and last mile problem. This is connecting folks who want to use public transportation from the actual transit location to their house. We are launching programs in cities such as Centennial, Colorado, where they're subsidizing actual Lyft rides to and from the station. In Sacramento, just a couple weeks ago, we launched a partnership with the Sacramento Regional Transit. A big issue there is the new Golden One Center. You can't have everyone driving in from the suburbs into downtown Sacramento, so there's a subsidy of up to $5 for Lyft rides to get to the transit stations. The vision here is that when it comes time, it's not so much what the cars are going to look like on the inside, but what it will enable in terms of the world around them. This is why we should all care about this change in transportation. Since autonomous networks will be so efficient rather than individual car ownership, many cars will come on the road, freeing up enormous amounts of space to be used for things other than parking or storing your car. We've already seen this change in old transit areas, such as in the High Line in New York, as well as in where the Central Expressway is in San Francisco. There's now a park in Hayes Valley. Concluding with Jane Jacobs' words, streets and their sidewalks, the main public places of a city, are its most vital organs. Cars have defined our cities, and now it's time for people to redefine our cities. Cities with less traffic, less pollution, a world where we need less parking and where streets can be narrowed and sidewalks widened. It's a world where we construct new housing and small businesses on existing parking lots or turn them into green spaces and parks. That's a world built around people, not cars. Our society is at a fork in the road. We need decisive action from all of us, business leaders, policymakers, city planners, and citizens to realize the full potential of this third transportation revolution. It's a long and exciting road ahead, and I thank you all. Thank you.
Hold on. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm throwing him a curveball. He does not know I was going to ask a question.
Perfect.
So you have no idea this is coming. By the way, who are you voting for? No, that's not the case. As this starts to roll out, I see the other impacts you have as you get rid of the human driver. There are fewer cars, so fewer jobs for car makers, fewer car dealers. Fewer people have cars, less insurance. There's even less money coming into parking meters for the city. As this rolls out, it's going to change. It seems to be there'll be fewer jobs and less revenues in certain ways. So is there a thought process as this autonomous economy and driverless car situation comes out? What do we do for jobs, for people who lose them?
Yeah, no, certainly. It's an excellent question and certainly something that we're thinking a lot about at Lyft. And I don't know that we have a clear answer on what it's going to mean. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of infrastructure that, as we've outlined, cities are going to be changing, as parking lots are going to be changed, as these autonomous vehicles are going to be developed. I certainly think that we're going to see our economy go through shifts, just as we have a number of different times. So, I don't know that we can comment on exactly what it means in the long term,
right.
But I'm
it's just a big
optimistic
picture.
About what the future means.
Timothy Burr, thank you very much, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Let me throw that at you. Okay, next is a company that could erase the nightmare of the 405. Bruce Upbin is VP for Strategic Communications at Hyperloop One, which, if it works, you could be sucked into this vacuum tube from LA to San Francisco in a half hour, faster than a plane or the high-speed rail. Before he came here, Bruce was working at Forbes, where he was managing editor of tech coverage. He took a dive from covering a company to actually being in one. That is very exciting. Let us welcome Bruce Upbin.
Thank you, everyone. Just a correction, Forbes is a company, too. But yeah, it's the other side, the dark side. So Hyperloop One, how many of you have heard of Hyperloop, by the way? So we're doing our job, or Elon Musk is. So we're living in a kind of, as Tim was saying, an interesting time in the world. There's a cadence to history in transportation where every 80 years or so, a new paradigm emerges. If you go back to the early 19th century, there was steamships, railroads, cars, planes, sort of high-speed rail in the middle there, and then we've been 80 years, almost 100 years since the last paradigm. And if you believe that history repeats itself, or at least rhymes, it's time for something new. And we all know the hassles. You saw some of it on Tim's slides, the traffic, the congestion. Our airports are full. Our railroads are not exactly serving us. Roads are crowded and dangerous. So what are you going to do? So about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, our good friend Elon Musk wrote a white paper describing the Hyperloop. And it was this, he talked about this 30-minute trip from San Francisco to LA. But I want you to put that trip out of your mind for now, because we're not looking at that route right now. The politics are very complicated in California, as you know. The California High-Speed Rail project is having its issues, and we kind of don't want that to be our first project. So today I'm going to talk to you about another project we're working on. We do have passenger systems in the works, but we also are working with cargo operators as well. We think that cargo is an exciting opportunity for high-speed travel, or at least dedicated, reliable, safe, green travel. So what is Hyperloop? Okay, it's basically a tube. We pull most of the air out of the tube, so there's no aerodynamic friction. We levitate a pod and propel it using an electric motor at airline speeds. Our engineers tell us that it's going to be as smooth as an elevator ride, and the acceleration will feel no different than merging onto a highway in a Honda Civic or taking off on a runway in an Airbus 380, about half of a G. So there's a tube, there's an engine. The engine's really just a stationary stator block, if you understand what that means, just a stationary motor. We take a regular motor and stretch it out over 2 miles and run the pod right over it using magnets to both propel it and levitate. There's a rendering of it here. You can see it goes across the countryside, usually above ground where possible, or if we have to tunnel, we'll tunnel. But the idea is not to have it at grade like a railroad. That pod is going to change in a few weeks. We're going to unveil some pretty exciting new designs for the passenger experience. But it's a steel tube right now. We may turn to a different material, and it's ultra low pressure. We've got vacuum pumps all along the route. You can go, the kind of sweet spot is 200 to 400 kilometers or miles, kind of think inner city travel, discount airlines, like a Southwest type of trip. And they're going to come in different sizes, I mentioned. Shipping containers, passengers. There could be a hybrid tube in the middle there where we have people and parcels, or small cargo, and then the small tube for high value packages and mail couriers. We have we have a Hyperloop One global challenge right now in the world where we're inviting everyone to register and bid essentially for free on a route in their country in as great a detail as they can. And we have a team in the Netherlands that wants to move living tissue between 2 hospital medical centers through the Hyperloop. So just an idea of the comparison to existing modes. Think about it. It does save you time, but when we think about the time of travel, it's not the transit really. It's the frictional points, getting to the airport, getting to the train station, waiting for your train to leave or your flight to leave. We're really beholden to the operator's time frames, and we believe that that's unnecessary. The Hyperloop leaves whenever you're ready. There's departures every minute or so. So this is a route we actually are looking at. Down the road, the UK government is struggling to get support for the HS2 high-speed rail between London and Manchester, but this gives you an idea of the comparison. You can see about 3-4 hours to drive, 2 hours to take the regular train. The high-speed rail, if it existed, would be an hour and change. Hyperloop, 20 minutes. Same price as a bus ticket. So, as I mentioned, speed on demand is one reason it's faster. It's also point to point. You don't have to stop along the way. We're going to have switching off ramps and on ramps, so you can pick where you want to go with your app and go exactly there and not have to wait at a different station for people to get on and off. You're in your pod, the door closes, it doesn't open until you're there. And it's reliable. It's a sealed infrastructure. Don't worry about weather, snow, rain, wind, sandstorms. The Spaniards built the Saudis' high-speed rail in the desert, and the tracks are continuously filling up with sand during sandstorms. They're building walls around it. We think just build a tube. Why not skip to the next paradigm? And it's high capacity. It's leaving all the time, so it's about the same capacity as an 800, 900 person train set. So our energy profile is very low. It's about equivalent to high-speed rail, but it's cheaper because we don't need to power the whole track. Remember, we're pushing you for the first 2 miles of your 100-mile journey over a motor, and then you're gliding for hundreds of miles with no extra energy and no infrastructure along the way. And there's no direct emissions. It's all electric. We're grid agnostic. We can pull power from whatever mode is available. If it's solar or wind, then it's green all the way through, stem to stern. Low footprint, because we're above ground or in the tunnel, it doesn't intrude on the built environment. No tearing up neighborhoods and blocking and byways. And 90% of the cause of accidents for surface transit are at-grade crossings and driver error, people falling asleep, or weather. And we eliminate all 3 of those. So it's inherently safer, and there's no noise. So who are we? We're a startup in LA. We're about a mile from here in the Arts District. 200 people in total. We've got a campus there. We've got a team in 2 sites in Nevada, one in North Las Vegas, about 100,000 square foot tooling machine shop, and a test and safety site about 40 miles north of the Vegas Strip, where we're building a Hyperloop. And it's not something that's 5 years from now or 10 years from now. It's going to be available. It's going to be, you can see it operating in the first quarter of next year. You can see some of the components being put together right now. And this is that's a giant vacuum pump there. It's going to pull the air out. And our tube deformer machine, you see that? It's stretching the tube and making sure it's perfectly round to be fit onto the tube that comes after it. So what are we looking at? What's our business opportunity here? I mentioned cargo. You can see some of our deal pipeline there. You can't read that, but you can see we're looking in Finland. We're looking in Port of LA, Long Beach. I'm going to touch on that next. The Dubai is a very hot for the Hyperloop. We have an agreement with DP World, the third, fourth largest ports operator in the world to manage their cargo for them. We're in Russia in discussions. We have proposals for a commuter system in Moscow and a cargo system in Russia's Far East. We've had conversations, very productive conversations in the UK, Australia, the Netherlands, Switzerland. The world is ready for something new. So let's talk about the Port of LA and Long Beach. We have a feasibility study underway right now with our friends at AECOM, the results of which should be available in less than a month. But the Port of LA and Long Beach has some interesting challenges. The global trade continues to grow, despite a slight slowdown in the China trade. But it's the largest port in the United States. It handles about 15 million 20-foot equivalent containers a year. It's about 40% of all US imports. But the volume is, despite that China slowdown, they had their second highest volume month in history in August. And there's nowhere to build. And the problem with the Port of LA Long Beach, it's not a problem, it's just a fact, is drayage, which is an old term for moving cargo from a port to its next destination for either transshipment or warehouse or distribution center. Who pays for it? Usually the holder of the goods, the warehouse or the logistics facility. It could be up to 50% of the operational cost, way higher than even rent, which is a lot in this area. And the ports of LA and Long Beach are much more dependent on trucks than other ports of its size for drayage. And if you've ever been on the 710, you know what I'm talking about. And the big trend over the last 5-10 years or so with ports and drayage is to build these inland container ports or dry ports that are nowhere near the coast that enable ports to increase their throughput and productivity by moving containers inland faster. And they're doing that with usually trucks or rail. And we think Hyperloop could be an interesting solution. So this is the problem. You can see trucks lining up at the port to get in. A lot of this, they play a game where they try to wait until the shifts are changing so they can pay a lower rate. But you know, a port of LA Long Beach's size, they have a measurement for how efficient a port is. And anything above 50 is good. And this port should be around 50, but it hasn't seen 50. It's usually been around 40 for the last 3 years or so. And truckers have to budget at least 3 hours turnaround time to make an on-time delivery. And they end up charging their customers surcharges for this late time. And all this leads to pollution and congestion, and the communities are pretty fed up with it. So what are the solutions? Well, the people have been talking about expanding the 710. I picked, of course, the most salacious photos I could find, sorry. Love it or hate it, most people hate the 710. It extends from the ports up to East LA, about 43,000 daily truck trips. It's the most hazardous stretch of road in LA County. And guess what? People are fighting its expansion every step of the way. And traffic could easily double in the next 20 years. So, you know, they tried an environmental study. There was a widening effort. They went back to the drawing board at a cost of $8 million. I wouldn't set your clock by its widening. Another solution which has been quite successful is the Alameda Corridor. And I say successful in that it has taken a lot of containers off the road, off the rail, and trucks. This is the 10-mile trench that they built at a cost of around $2.5 billion. You can see there's room for a third track. There's 2 tracks along the way. A lot of it's run on Burlington Northern and Union Pacific. A lot of the cargo that goes on it is headed for places like Chicago. It's a long distance, you know, heading towards the national rail network. But the railroads have a lot of overcapacity on the short haul, which they sometimes use it for, but a lot of times the shippers take stuff off the corridor and put it back on the trucks on the highways, and that's a problem. And right now, the Alameda Corridor it came in on time and on budget, great infrastructure project, but right now it can't pay for itself. And some of that's being charged back to the ports, which is okay. The ports kind of know, they see the value and they structured the deal that way because they're willing to tolerate some risk. That's great. Don't write off the Alameda Corridor. But the idea is, this is one idea we're looking at, kind of an artist rendering, is driving a 2-way Hyperloop tube right to the port. Maybe it might not butt up right against the ship like you see it here. This was an artist's license, but you can imagine an autonomous system of containers moving into the tube constantly and merging in and zipping 24 hours a day, rain or shine, of course mostly shine in California, up to Ontario. This is the idea. We're looking at routes right now and the topography and what kind of speed and the system design. So the details are still in the works. But one of our ideas is to put the Hyperloop tube right in that corridor. And it could help both the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority recover some of that money. So you can see kind of the route. We're talking about all these benefits, less congestion, lower costs, save the city and the county billions of dollars on building a new freight infrastructure. And it's safer, again, quieter, and cargo can get there in a fraction of the time. So we're taking this idea into Dubai. This is a kind of a radical idea that the DP World, our friends in Dubai, have done. They built a giant man-made island for extra capacity. We could build a Hyperloop system that can take freight off that. Doing the same thing in Russia's Far East, between China and a port on the Northern Pacific. Proposals are already in there, and the Russian government is highly enthusiastic about it. So that's the idea. Again, drive that San Francisco to LA route out of your mind. Hyperloop is much more global than that, and it involves cargo and passengers. The idea is to save time. I mean, it's great to have autonomous vehicles and get that time back, productive time, in your car. But we think that if you can get where you want to go in 1/10 of the time, you'll take that bet. Thank you.
All right. Last question, I promise. Assuming the technology proves out, how much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? And when will it be ready?
So we're saying 2020 for a cargo system in operation and 2021 for a passenger system, somewhere in the world. As far as cost, we've been out there saying if you exclude all the stations and the civil engineering required tunneling, just the straight infrastructure cost, it's somewhere between $11 and $19 million a mile or kilometer. And who's going to pay for it? That's a great question. Yeah, not us. We're going to partner, put some equity together, create these infrastructure deals where we get a government entity or a private equity or pension fund to put the money together, and then we go and raise debt. Typical deal. Same thing as a railroad would do.
So we'll bring you back in 4 years, in 2020, to see if it's up and running. Yeah. Okay, Bruce, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our final speaker is Starman Dave Gallagher. He's the Associate Director for Strategic Integration at JPL, which is one of my favorite places here in Southern California. It's his job to decide where to invest NASA money, your money, in what projects over the next decade, specifically where we're going with robotic exploration in space. And robots in space don't take any jobs yet. So let's welcome Dave Gallagher.
There's a star man waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow out.
Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you to the Milken Institute. I will admit that's the first time I've ever had walk-on music. I don't quite know how to deal with that, but let's see. I'm really excited to chat with you today about innovation and culture at JPL. Raise your hands if you've been to JPL. Oh, excellent. Okay. Raise your hands if you've never heard of JPL. Okay, even better. All right, let's launch right into this. So this image is what we like to call the nativity scene. This is our first 5 employees. They were at Caltech doing rocket experiments, working on different types of propulsion, and managed to blow up a lab pretty significantly, and were politely asked to leave. And they set up camp in the Arroyo Seco right next to what is now JPL in Pasadena. So that is the beginning of JPL in 1936. This is 80 years later. This is JPL today. When people ask me what JPL is, I like to think of it as the combination of 2 of the greatest institutions on the planet, NASA and Caltech. So what do? We are NASA's FFRDC, which is Federally Funded Research and Development Center. What that really means is we're the only NASA center that are not civil servants. We all work for Caltech. We're all Caltech employees. So that's what we do. We have 5,500 employees. We do just shy of $2 billion a year in business. We love California. California loves us. Lots of jobs, lots of money moving through JPL. If you look at the bottom right of the image here, you'll see that dark area. That is actually the nativity scene, which is now a parking lot. So you can cut back to the Lyft talk for that one. Okay. So here we are in the 1940s. You're probably all wondering, what the heck is this? So the Army Air Corps needed to figure out a way to get prop planes, because jet planes weren't around yet, to take off in very short spaces. So they turned to JPL. We developed something called the JATO bottle, Jet Assisted Takeoff. We tried to find unsuspecting pilots and strap this JATO bottle under their plane and set them free. And what I love about this image is you've got all the Army Air Corps guys looking off at the test site and seeing if the thing is taking off. They would draw chalk marks on the runway. And the shirtless JPLer is apparently looking for what's next. So since we're talking about innovation, that is the type of employee that I look for. I'm sure most of you saw The Martian. That's the Mark Watney of the 1940s. So he's going to science the heck out of it. So here we go, 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik. And America's response to Sputnik, the most powerful country in the world's response to Sputnik, came from Caltech. Even today, Caltech has maybe 200 kids in their freshman classes, in their whole freshman class. It's absolutely amazing that our country responded from this little tiny university with Explorer 1. This iconic image, on the left you see Bill Pickering. He's the first director of JPL. Next to him is Van Allen, who discovered the Van Allen radiation belts with Explorer 1. And then you have Wernher von Braun next to him. So that's sort of where we got started. That's when NASA was formed. JPL came into NASA, and we've been doing great stuff ever since then. I'm going to tell you 3 quick stories of innovation. I'd like to start with, in 2004, we landed 2 beach cooler size rovers on Mars. They were called Spirit and Opportunity. We used airbags just before striking the planet. The airbags inflated. They bounced around for a while. I'm sure a lot of you have seen images of that. So in 2012, we wanted to send a full scientific geological laboratory to the surface of Mars. Much, much more massive. Unlike a beach cooler, this is about the size of a Mini Cooper. We had to come up with a better way to get that much mass down to the planet. So it's a real innovation challenge, and in the Mark Watney spirit, here's what we came up with.
Entry, descent, and landing, also known as EDL, is referred to as the 7 minutes of terror, because we've got literally 7 minutes to get from the top of the atmosphere to the surface of Mars, going from 13,000 miles an hour to 0, in perfect sequence, perfect choreography, perfect timing, and the computer has to do it all by itself with no help from the ground. If any one thing doesn't work just right, it's game over.
We slam into the atmosphere and develop so much aerodynamic drag. Our heat shield, it heats up and it glows like the surface of the sun. 1,600 degrees.
Mars is actually really hard to slow down because it has just enough atmosphere that you have to deal with it. Otherwise, it will destroy your spacecraft. On the other hand, it doesn't have enough atmosphere to finish the job. We're still going about 1,000 miles an hour. So at that point, we use a parachute.
The parachute is the largest and strongest supersonic parachute that we've ever built to date. It has to be able to withstand 65,000 pounds of force.
This big, huge parachute that we've got, it'll only slow us down to about 200 miles an hour. We've got to cut it off and then come down in rockets. First thing we do is make this really radical divergent movement.
Diverting away from the parachute, killing our horizontal velocity and our vertical velocity, getting the rover moving straight up and down so it can look at the surface with its radar and see where we're going to land. And we head straight down to the bottom of a crater, right beside a 6-kilometer high mountain. 20 meters above the surface, we have to lower the rover below us on a tether and then gently deposit it on its wheels, on the surface.
The descent stage, it's in a collision course with the rover. We must cut the bridle immediately and fly the descent stage to a safe distance from the rover.
So you weren't supposed to clap yet. So we're talking about autonomy and innovation. I just want to remind everybody that's happening 100 million miles away. It's all completely autonomous. There's no joysticking. By the time we got the data, I was there at JPL when we landed, just amazing. By the time we got the data, this had all happened 8 minutes ago. So really an example of a tremendous autonomy and effort. What I'd like to show you now is the world's most expensive selfie stick. We are cool at JPL. We have a selfie stick, and we did that. In the next image, these are the Namib Dunes on Mars. And what I love about this image is, first of all, you could be out at Joshua Tree if there weren't a Mars rover wheel in the bottom right of the image walking around. And secondly, this is not the set of a movie. I mean, this is really exploring our solar system. It's just absolutely fabulous. The best part of this, we're going back in 2020 This time we're going to cache samples in hermetic sealed devices to go back and retrieve later. We're going to use all of our new instruments. There's all kinds of laser ablation tools, essentially a full electron microscopes, et cetera, a full geological lab, and we will go back and pick those up. We're also, as if that weren't enough, we are working on technology to develop a very small helicopter Scout, which we are working with NASA to decide if that will go on Mars 2020 or not. But we've built it, we've tested it in our vacuum chamber. Suffice it to say, when you only have 1% atmosphere, flying a helicopter is extremely hard. You have nothing to push against. In addition to that, all the control laws of flight are very, very different. So anyway, very, very exciting stuff. Moving to the next story, most of you know this image. It was called by Time Magazine and put in Time Magazine as one of the 100 most iconic images in all of history. These are the pillars of creation in the Eagle Nebula, 7,000 light years away. The pillar on the left is about 4 light years tall. Let me just say briefly what's going on here. Stars are forming inside these dust pillars. The light from other stars is eroding the dust away, and I still get excited to see these. So it wasn't always that way. Hubble launched in 1990 and became very quickly a black eye to NASA and to the United States. It had what's called spherical aberration. You have an 8-foot diameter primary mirror in the telescope. The very outside edge of the mirror was misground by about 1/50th the width of a human hair. That's enough to ruin all of the images, make them blurry, make them not even as good as ground-based telescope images. NASA came to JPL, asked us to figure out what is the prescription that would correct this. We did that. It was a team across NASA. We then built an instrument, which is pictured in this image, called WIFPIC-2, and on 4 nickel-size mirrors, we ground the corrective prescription. I like to call it contact lenses, but they're really mirrors. And the astronauts went up, 1993, installed this instrument. I was sitting there in the control room when the first corrected images, as was this gentleman sitting over there, the first corrected images came across, back then, the slow raster across a cathode ray tube, and it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. This is the Hubble Deep Field. If you don't know it, those little dots are not stars, those are galaxies, and each one of there are millions of galaxies, and each one of those galaxies has trillions of stars, and each one of those stars we now know has planets. When I get spun up about the election, as Jane was referring to, I use this image to keep my perspective that we are one blip on one blip in one of these galaxies in our universe, so it's all going to be okay. Last story I'll tell you is humankind has been asking the question since the dawn of time, are we alone? And as you know by now, there really is no free lunch, so I'm going to make you learn something for about 90 seconds, so bear with me. So an exoplanet is a planet that's around a star other than ours. So it can be an Earth-like planet, it can be bigger, smaller. So that's what an exoplanet is, and in this image, let me get to that in a second. So in order to make progress in finding these exoplanets, we at JPL and NASA had determined that the only thing to do was to build a gigantic telescope, which would cost probably $10 billion to really make progress in this field. And again, innovation, a principal investigator, Bill Barucki, kind of an innovative, eccentric guy, said, wait a sec, I have an idea. Let's stare at a 10 by 10 degree patch of sky with a small telescope, and let's look for stars moving for planets moving in front of their parent stars, and using supercomputers and statistics. You can see as that planet passes in front, you get that dip in the light curve. Using supercomputers and statistics, we have now moved to identifying almost 4,000 exoplanets are confirmed. That is a little bit behind. With the Kepler mission, So for a very, very low-cost mission, we were able, through innovation and creativity, to push this field, and this is now the most exciting field in astronomy. And one of the things we're trying to do better at JPL and NASA is tell our stories. So in the spirit of the old vintage travel posters, we had our artist in residence develop these exoplanets. So these are just 3 of the thousands of exoplanets. Kepler 186f is a very red planet. It's always redder on the other side of the fence. The one in the middle is a super planet, very large, with a very giant gravity field. You get that. And then the one on the right, and this is real, this is Kepler 16b. This is a planet orbiting 2 stars like Tatooine in Star Wars. I'll close with our innovators of the future.
What does JPL do?
It's the most unique place to work on Earth.
Our charter is to do things no one has done before.
We do what no one else even dares to dream about.
Imagination and innovation are crucial in being able to do the kind of work that we do.
Innovation comes from people, but it also, I think, comes from structure and from the environment. If you can provide people with the appropriate tools, the appropriate workspace, the appropriate environments, you're also going to get a higher innovation output.
One of the things that makes the JPL environment so special to work in is that even when you first walk on lab, it feels like a campus.
And you walk around, you hear people talking about their work.
What would be the best way to get a subsurface vehicle beneath the ice of Europa? And you're thinking, those people aren't just talking about it because they saw it on a movie somewhere. It's because they're really trying to figure out how to do it.
JPL is an incredibly diverse place.
There's thousands of people here with big brains.
Planetary science, answering these big questions, you need chemists, physicists, astrophysicists, biologists, and then you need everyone on the engineering side to actually build the things that you need to answer the questions.
People know so much about so many different things that if I'm looking for an expert in a particular field, engineering or science related, I could probably find them at JPL. I don't have to pick up the phone, I just have to walk down the hallway.
Science is all about asking questions, and engineering is all about finding solutions. And so it makes sense to marry these two things together and try and answer the biggest, toughest, most difficult questions we can come up with.
What does JPL do? JPL builds the tools for exploring space.
The boldness of my colleagues is inspirational. The scope of the questions that they want to answer and the courage with which they go about tackling these big questions.
The passion of the people, the drive, the enthusiasm, and just the intelligence, the intellect that people throw every day at every problem that comes across.
Given a very challenging problem, please do this thing that's never been done before, that we don't know what to expect, that there's a huge uncertainty involved with. Most people would be terrified by that problem. I think those are the problems that we salivate over.
We shouldn't do something because it's safe and easy. We shouldn't do the thing that everybody knows how to do. We should push the boundary, and even if that means we might fail, we might succeed too.
I've never met anybody here that says, well, it's too hard. We all sit down and we just start crunching the numbers and figuring out how to get it done.
It's a journey. It's not necessarily an end destination. It's the whole way in which you're getting there.
It's a very liberating kind of environment to be in because you don't have to be so afraid of mistakes.
To recognize that we're doing science inside the solar system, outside the solar system, science focused back on Earth.
Our missions have a goal of helping humans understand more about the universe, and I think that's pretty amazing.
JPL has enormous respect for a good idea, and if you have a good idea, this is the place to bring it to fruition.
JPL is a special place because it allows people to have careers that are only limited by their imagination.
Well, there certainly is this drive, I think, from the human race to go explore, and not everybody is involved directly with that effort. As the years go by when you're at JPL, it becomes very clear that it truly is a privilege to be here.
This lab is leaving a legacy for not just the country, but for the world. And someday, if we ever do find that exoplanet that has life on it, or encounter some other solar system outside of ours, this is a place that's going to do that.
so much.
That was great.
Thank you.
Who says we don't make things in California anymore? That was fantastic, and thank you for putting everything in perspective. I want to thank our speakers for opening our eyes to some of the incredible innovations here in the Golden State, and thanks for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Good afternoon.